welcome to Live Action Star Wars bonus episode, where I am here with Adam Frazier, who you've probably seen on the show before. And today we're just going to have, we call it a review. It's more of like an informal chat about the more recently released Shadows of the Sith by Adam Christopher. New book. It's kind of been, I don't know, it's felt like a big deal book amongst Star Wars fans. So yeah, Adam, how you doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm really good. It took me a little bit longer to get through this one because I had my vacation to Austin a couple of weeks back. So normally I'd get this read sort of in the first week and then I'd do a full written review in one of these sorts of episodes. But where I did that, everyone else has done their reviews and stuff already. And I love the book, but I don't think I've got anything new to say about it that people haven't already said. So we're just going to sit down and have a chat about it. But you got to read this early, didn't you? You had a preview copy.
I did. I got a digital copy and I flew through it. And the funny thing about the digital copy is that, you don't really get a good sense for how big the book is.
Yeah.
I know, I was just reading it feverishly and kind of flying through it. But when the physical copy arrived, I was like, oh, wow, this is like a sizable book, Like you're saying, it does feel like sort of a big deal.
It does. It definitely does. I haven't read the most recent Thrawn trilogy that Timothy Zahn did, but I think one of those is like currently the biggest of the canon releases, but this is like only sort of 10, 20 pages shorter. I'm looking at it now. It's listed on the Wikipedia as 496 pages. So it's a pretty sizable book.
And they pack a lot of story into those pages.
There is a lot going on. Yeah, like I got the physical book. I had it pre-ordered, and when it arrived, like it was the day I was packing for my trip, and I was like, "Yeah, I'm just gonna go ahead and buy the digital one because I don't really want to be lugging that around." I had it on my Kindle and was reading it a bit on the plane, like there and back. But I mostly read it physically when I got back. And yeah, you said they pack a lot in, and it is jam-packed, start to finish. But it never feels slow, I didn't think.
No, I don't think so. And I think it jumps around enough to where right when you're wondering, I wonder what's going on with this character, it's kind of like, there you go.
They're back. Yeah.
And I guess we should preface by saying, so this book takes place 17 years after Return of the Jedi.
17,
and like 13 years before Force Awakens. So like kind of smack dab in the middle there.
And it's before Bloodline as well, isn't it? The Claudia Gray book, I believe. Yeah. Because in that book, it's revealed that Vader is Luke and Leia's father. Right. And that's also like when Ben finds out. We don't see it from Ben's perspective, but like it's around that time that Ben finds out about his heritage and everything, which is interesting because we do have quite a bit, especially in the early of Ben Solo in this book, as he's at Luke's academy, he's training, and he feels like, he's a kid who he's got high ambition, but he feels like a pretty good kid otherwise.
And he's like basically like Luke's assistant. Like Luke has to take this mission and leave the temple, and Ben's sort of left in charge of looking after the students and stuff. So it
definitely feels like he is sort of the most senior of the apprentices, of the Padawans. And Luke struggles early on with sort of, do I make him cut his hair? And he's always trying to correct him to get him to call him Master Skywalker, not Uncle Luke.
Right.
But there's that sort of walking the fine line of the familial bond and then the master and apprentice sort of thing. So it is interesting. Luke he's clearly doing things his own way. He's not stuck in the old regimented, Jedi Order sort of.
We're
thing.
sort of seeing the progression of how we saw him in Book of Boba Fett, where he's, potentially looking at Grogu as his first student, and, he's sort of trying to navigate the old way and, what he knows from Yoda and Ben. So, I thought that was really cool to sort of get a glimpse at Ben at that age. And I have a feeling that that's not obviously the last time we're going to.
I hope not. I'd love to see more of Luke and the Academy on Arsus and get to know some more of those students. I think that'd be a really interesting.
And I'm actually wondering if, the reception to this book by fans has been pretty tremendous. And it's a bestseller. And I'm just wondering now if we're going to get.
I'd be happy with. Yeah. Because Adam Christopher, before this, he was tapped to write the original novel, like set in the Mandalorian time. So this sort of same time. That book was cancelled, and then he was given this project.
Yeah.
And at the time when I saw that book was cancelled, I was kind of disappointed. But when we got this afterwards, I'm quite glad. I'd rather have this We got another guest on the podcast.
Yeah, sorry.
That's okay. It's so yeah. To get this instead of that book, I think it's a better fit, and also it makes me think that because they decided to do the stuff with Luke in the Book of Boba Fett, they've probably gone, no, actually, we can tell some other stories with Luke.
Yeah.
There was no mention of Grogu in this, but we know sort of that he left. He didn't stick around to train.
And we also they mentioned Tython, the Jedi Temple
with the Seeing Stone.
Yeah, with the Seeing Stone from Mandalorian. So, and Luke actually goes there himself, and we get this amazing scene where he talks to Anakin. And
I mean, he sort of is teleported to Exegol, isn't he? But like mentally, he doesn't know that it's Exegol at the time.
Yeah,
but Luke at the start of this book, he's been having visions, nightmares, and things.
Yeah, he like senses a resurgence in the dark side, and he has these visions of a Sith planet.
Yeah. That sort of starts Luke's side of this story. And yeah, it's funny, isn't it? Because obviously Tython is where Boba Fett came into the picture for Din Djarin in the Mandalorian story. And it's on Tython that Lando catches up to Luke in this. Right. So it's this focal point planet. And I think they've already said, or it's heavily rumored at least, that we're going to see it again in the Ahsoka series.
Oh, great. Yeah, I can totally see that. Yeah.
So if she goes there, because she obviously knows about it, she's the one who sent Din there. If she goes there to sort of try and find Ezra or Thrawn or whatever, like it makes sense. And if they're using this as sort of like the way station almost, it's cool. It's an interesting thing. And yeah, I mean, just Tython in general, it's one of those connections to old canon, old EU stuff that has been brought forward, and there was a few in this book that I really enjoyed. I was on the plane and I was sat next to other friend of the show, Ed, and I was reading and I was like, and I was sort of just showing him when the Errant Venture was mentioned.
Oh yeah,
which back in the old X-Wing books was it was a converted Star Destroyer that was now a casino, like a floating casino and stuff. And I was like, and it's mentioned as still a casino. We don't know that it's still a Star Destroyer, but it's cool. Those sort of little nods. It definitely feels like Adam Christopher he's pulling the bits and stuff that he wants to recanonize.
Yeah, absolutely. I loved all the little bits and pieces of just characters that I didn't really expect to show up in this. Like, we got some cool stuff with Lor Santeca.
Yep.
Which I think that's really sort of an untapped area of Star Wars storytelling. Great. I could see a younger Lor Santeca showing up in these Mando series at some point.
Sure. For sure.
Hearing him again, and then Beaumont Kin, the character from Revenge of the Sith, developed his character as this sort of archaeologist and Sith expert, which I thought was really cool.
It's doing what Star Wars books have always done well. It used to be kind of cheesy because they'd have one line to go off of, and they'd basically extrapolate out a character based on that one line that they said. Whereas now, like in Rise of Skywalker, Beaumont Kin, he mentions how, it's ancient Sith magic and things like that. And you see him messing around in his computer a bit, but to extend that out to a point where, of course he knows about ancient Sith magic because he was studying. He was a scientist. Right. He was an archaeologist. So it's interesting to develop that character a bit more there. And it would be cool to get Dominic Monaghan to do something else. He seemed keen to. So
and I just like to just sort of the overarching thing of the book is like it really expands the universe. Like it never, even though there's characters that we've seen before and stuff, it never felt like we were making the galaxy smaller. I mean, they go to a ton of planets in this. If this was like an action movie, we would say it was like a global, a globe
trotting. Yeah, for sure.
They go to so many different planets, and to sort
most of them are new as well. Like most of them, I mean, even if they've been maybe mentioned in passing before, like this is the first time that I can recall visiting them, and they're all vastly different as well.
Yeah,
there's some really cool settings in this book.
Yeah, and really cool settings. Some very interesting characters, like the is it Kiza or Kaiser?
Kaiser, yeah. The villain, the sort of the main villain of the book.
Yeah, the former acolyte of the Beyond, and she's sort of possessed by a Sith mask, sort of like the mask of Momin from the Lando comic.
Yeah, one of the Lando comics. Which again, I like the connection to the comics where when Lando's hearing about this mask, he's like, "Oh, I've encountered something like that before."
Right.
Referring back to it, so that people like us who we trawl through all of this stuff, and it might have been years ago that it was mentioned, but it's not making the world smaller. It's tying it all together. It's making it one cohesive story.
Yeah. I thought that was super cool. And then they introduce a new acolyte of Beyond, Comat. And it was so seamlessly done that I was wondering, like,
have I missed something?
Yeah, do I know this character from something? Like, I was like doing a quick Google search. And
I had to do the same.
Yeah.
Especially as there is a history with this character. Luke has already encountered her, that helped her redeem herself, like help her break away from the acolytes of the Beyond, and is now she's living in isolation. She's got this sort of, when she hears about it being Kaiser who is the villain, she sort of, there's almost like this sense of duty. Like that's what would get her to come out of her isolation.
Yeah.
And she helps out Luke and Lando quite a lot as the story goes on. Lando especially.
Yeah.
We find out later on that the armor that he's wearing in Rise of Skywalker was given to him by her and things like that. She lives on a pretty hostile place.
Her planet.
You go outside and it's toxic. Like it's horrible.
It's called Polar.
That's it. Yeah.
A crazy planet, and I love like her and her droid, who's this like total badass.
It's great. It's again, it's in that the droids like the HK-47 sort of mold of like, I'm here, I'm gonna kick your ass. I think this one sort of swings two swords basically, doesn't it? It's like it's different, but these combat protection droids that also help with the farming, which is like, it's great. It's what you want to see from a Star Wars droid for sure.
That's the other thing that struck me about the book is I don't want to generalize all of Star Wars publishing in the Disney era, but I feel like a lot of the books sometimes get a little talky, and they sort of, to me, like, while I enjoy reading them, they certainly feel like stories that if it were a movie, you'd be like, oh, this is missing some key Star Wars elements, like as far as like a cinematic experience goes.
Yeah.
And I thought this one was filled with action, chase sequences. It's a very cinematic book. You can picture the descriptions of these fights where like Luke and the droid are fighting together against like these Sith like disciples and stuff. I mean, it just sounded so awesome, where I was immediately like, okay, I want a video game, I want a comic book, I want toys, I want the whole deal. Like, this is so cool.
I'd happily, I'd take some concept art like of some of those fights and stuff.
Absolutely.
Like at a minimum, like that would be great.
Yeah.
The cover it's excellent. It feels like an old school sort of EU book, but it's a bit dark, it's a bit gritty. It definitely doesn't look like any other Star Wars books that we've had recently.
Yeah.
And it makes me go sort of with the sort of the title framing of it. I should have pulled up an image, but the way that it's laid out is different. So it makes me go, okay, cool. If they wanted to do more books, in this sort of time frame, in this era, like there's your sort of iconography for it is already set and ready. It's cool. We've danced around the fact that Lando's in this book, but he is the sort of the second lead. Like it's Luke and Lando. It's a two-header from the good guy perspective anyway.
Yeah. Not only is it a great like Luke Skywalker adventure, and it gives you what you've wanted in terms of like seeing Luke sort of in his prime and doing these things, but also a lot of great character stuff with Lando. And I love how they pick up with him in the bar, and he like overhears about Ochi of Bestoon, and it kicks off this whole like sort of mystery that he has to unravel. And we learn more about his daughter, Kadara.
We get a name for her.
So,
it's not what's her name from Rise of Skywalker, like confirmed now. It's definitely a different character, but we also get to know why he would be so interested in helping her at the end of Rise, where she doesn't know where she's from. She was kidnapped as a kid. Yeah, it's a very similar story, and much in the way that he wants to help her at that. That's why he is desperate to help Dathan and Miramir, who we also meet in this book, Rey's parents.
Right.
But yeah, Lando's story is really interesting. It's if Comat is coming sort of from a sense of duty, Lando's almost doing it as a sort of a sense of redemption. He's got this guilt that he's put on himself about losing his daughter.
Yeah.
A while ago, and we know that he searched high and low. Lando, Leia, Luke, everyone close to Lando was helping in a search, and none of them could find the daughter.
Yeah, and that's an interesting, like, when you consider where the book takes place, like we said, it takes place 17 years after Return of the Jedi. You know, that's a lot of searching that's already happened. And so when we pick up with Lando here, it's not to say that he's given up hope, but he's certainly in a place where he's not sure if he's ever gonna find out, you know, like what happens.
And it's a dark place. Like when we first pick up with him, he is much like Han went back to his old ways. Lando's sort of gone back to his old ways.
Yeah.
And he's, you know, he's doing what he's good at, which is, you know, gambling and schmoozing.
Yeah.
So he can put on that brave face for everyone else, but inside, like he's still hurting. He's still struggling. We don't have confirmation of who the mother was, but they're clearly not together anymore.
Yeah.
Whether she's alive or dead or whatever, we don't have any idea, but they're not together. And it's, you know, you lose a daughter like that, and it's tough for everyone.
And it sort of mirrors like the sort of split between Han and Leia after being turned, you know.
Yeah, like, it's not through a lack of love or caring for each other. It's you lose a kid like that, and it drives a wedge. And there's only you have to do it. You have to grieve in your own way, sort of thing. And so, like, Han went off and became a smuggler again. Leia went back into war because, you know, politics was sort of ripped from her. So she went back to the only other thing that she was good at. And Lando's doing the same, but then he sees an opportunity to help people who aren't in that position yet, but are going to be. If Ochi's plan and his kidnapping of
there's sort of the bigger mystery of like, why is the Imperial remnant like taking these kids, you know, like, and it sort of also lays the groundwork to Snoke eventually manipulating Ben. Like this, you know, they're targeting children of the heroes of the rebellion. You know? Like, what purpose does that serve?
It does make you think that was Kadara not just a random snatch and grab of kids to join the First Order, but was it a targeted thing? Was it a thing to sort of drive a wedge and to sort of unstabilize Lando? Like these people who were leadership in the rebellion, like if anything was ever to come up, do you take Ben, do you take Kadara, do you take all these people so that leadership is shaken so that they can't rebel again? It's an interesting way of looking at it, and it's left open that we don't know much more about her. We don't know where she's ended up. We don't know where it's going. So if they wanted to do more, if they wanted to tell that story, or even seed things that they might want to hint at in a potential Lando series, as and when that comes, it would be great. It would be really interesting.
The other thing too about Lando and Luke is, while reading the book, I really felt like Adam Christopher had captured the voice of those characters and the way that they would interact alone with one another, because we never really got that in the movies.
No, there's a couple of conversations, but that's about all.
It felt very seamless, you know, like how they would react or interact with each other without Han and Leia around. And it was like, you know, in the 90s when you're reading the Thrawn trilogy, I remember at the time, one of the big kind of selling points of that book is that Timothy Zahn had really nailed the voices of the characters, and they felt like a natural continuation of like Kasdan's writing of the characters. And I felt that here too. Like, this was the Luke Skywalker I knew. This was the Lando I knew. Developed further, of course, but it fit right into the overall saga.
And of course, linking back to the Heir to the Empire, one of the first times that we meet, I think the first moment that we meet Luke in that book, he's on in the I think it's not the Jedi Temple, but it's the old Imperial Palace that has been converted, and he's drinking a hot chocolate that he'd found out about how to make this new drink called hot chocolate from Lando. And so even now, like that's funny. That has been brought forward. So like hot chocolate is something that Lando gives to Luke because he doesn't really drink on any of the fancy alcohol that you So it's still like he's still the farm boy and the suave smuggler. Like they have that relationship. Like there's a few times where Luke is obviously the wiser and comes off as like the more mature and older one of the two, but like Lando still says like, come on, kid, I am older than you. Like, there's a couple of moments like that.
Luke is like very wise and like he's book smart, but Lando is street smart, and so Luke's still a little naive when it comes to things like that. And so Lando
dealing with some like people that they don't care that he's this one only Jedi that's out there. Like, no one gives a shit if you're out in the sticks. Like, he's just a dude in a robe, whereas Lando is, oh, that's that card player. He can get you in the right places.
Right. Yeah.
And when they're going to some of these shady spaceports, like, that's who you need more than a Jedi.
Totally. I guess we should probably talk about Rey's parents in a little more detail. Because...
I mean, when you first started reading this book, I think you tweeted out that you were like 5 chapters in, and you're like, this is blowing the doors way off of anyone's expectations already.
Yeah.
And I'm guessing because they're the first chapter of the book, we find out about them.
Yeah, I was not expecting this adventure to tie in directly to Rey's parents. And they do it in a way where, they obviously, Luke and Lando don't know that it's Rey's parents, right?
They never intersect.
Rey is. They never meet them specifically. They're just trying to help this family that's on the run from these
but from a few different places as well. Like,
right.
They're being hunted from different angles. Like, it's who's working for who is never really clear. They're all working for the Sith cultists on Exegol, really. Right. So Palpatine.
Yeah, they're not revealing that Palpatine obviously is back or anything, but you do have Ochi of Bastoon who gets a lot to do in the book, and you have Kiza and all these. You have like pirates and smuggler type scum and villainy characters, and
everyone's been hired by someone who's been hired by someone else, and again, it's that web of like, it all does link back to Exegol, and everyone's plot point does sort of link back there for a place that none of them end up making it back to, which is really fascinating. That's everyone's goal, everyone's destination, and no one makes it.
Yeah.
The only time that we're actually on Exegol in person is in a flashback with Dathan, the Rey's father, the clone of Palpatine, and we hear about his escape. We hear about him when he was a kid.
Such an interesting, obviously there's a lot of mirrors in Star Wars and a lot of connections. And I think it shouldn't be any surprise to anyone listening to this that Rey really, when you think about Rey as a character, she does sort of follow not just Luke's trajectory, but I think of Han a lot with Rey, that they were both orphans that sort of grew up in scavenge like salvage yards and things like that. Yeah, they're and to see that Dathan also sort of follows that, because he's sort of abandoned in the slums, the lower depths of Exegol, and
wasn't even given a name. He was just like he was the one who lived, and he's been kept alive for a purpose, but no one will tell him what that purpose is. And we know that it's Palpatine's sort of plan, and when he does escape, he sort of thinks that felt a little bit easy. Was this potentially what was wanted of me?
Did they let me go? Right.
It's the ease of the escape. It is, and we probably know that it is so that he can go and procreate and do that naturally. He's come from a clone. There's no force power. He doesn't feel any force sensitivity. He tries, but he doesn't feel any force sensitivity. But maybe his offspring would. And
it's pretty clear that Miramir does have a connection to the force, just in terms of like, she doesn't have any training per se in it, but she's
very much like Rey.
Like
it's
Rey,
just a natural ability to sort of get things done,
and reminded me of like Jyn Erso's mother, who was definitely a believer in the force and like a follower of it, even if she herself didn't display any abilities. But I was not expecting that much development of their characters, and I think it really I don't have any issues with Rise of Skywalker, really, but I think
we agree on that. Like,
I think it really strengthened a lot of things going on in that movie, and for people who were maybe underwhelmed by it or they wanted more explanation, this book definitely delivers it. It fills in some pretty big gaps.
Definitely. Ralph's here in the comments, and he says, will Rise of Skywalker haters find new value in the film, like, after this book? I think if they gave it a shot, they would. I don't know if anyone who really, really hates Rise of Skywalker with a passion would be interested in this book, because it fills in a lot of those gaps. It expands it out. I watched Rise of Skywalker again the other night after finishing this, and it definitely is a film that it has. I enjoy it, but it feels like it almost needs this as a supplemental material to sort of fill in some of those gaps that, because of the time frame that the movie's set in, it needs to go. Yeah. And I know that personally that's what Ralph loves about the film, is the sort of faster and more intense. Yeah. Whereas this book, it's still a lot going on. There's still a higher pace, but it's taking a bit more time. And so a lot of those plot points that people might have thought were rushed over in that film to a detriment, it expands on them. So everything with Ochi in this book it's taking what we hear about in the film, but then expanding on it more.
And we're not done. It's
no.
I think, like we've talked about before, the prequels, people had certain feelings about them, whether, they liked them or not. They might have felt that Anakin's fall was rushed and they didn't get to see enough of him and Obi-Wan as friends or what have you. And then boom, you got 7 seasons of the Clone Wars to kind of flesh that out. And Star Wars has always operated like that.
Yeah, that's what the old EU, all the people that still want to like bring back the EU, like it's because they've read all those stories.
Yeah.
And this is very much like that.
And look, like Star Wars has always operated like this. Like we all know Palpatine's name. It's never mentioned in the original trilogy, but we all knew it was Emperor Palpatine. Yeah. Like, how did we know that? Because like an action figure or a comic
toys
book.
Or it was a magazine article or something. Right.
Never once mentioned in the movies until
Organa. Like Organa is never said in the original movies. Leia Organa, but we all knew that was her name.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so I think we've seen in the Mandoverse, they're already sort of suggesting like the Snoke tanks and stuff like that. We're going to get more of this fleshing out of Rise of Skywalker before it's all said and done. So it is a thing though, where, if you can convince a hater to read it, like that's the hard part probably is
convincing them that, it's not all doom and gloom, that thing that you hate. Sure, have your opinion. No one's going to stop you from having your opinion about it, but give this a go, and it might, and I hope that it does give sort of a new appreciation for some of those elements.
Not only did it strengthen Rise of Skywalker for me, but it also actually strengthened The Last Jedi, because it really provides more motivation and more explanation for why Luke is the way he is in that movie, in terms of the flashback stuff, like why on earth would he pull his lightsaber up against Ben. But here, it's sort of fleshed out as he's been having these visions of the dark side, and he's really sort of fallen headfirst into this sort of conspiracy to figure out like what's going on, like why is the dark side still around.
They get around the fact that there is no Sith. There can't be any new Sith in this story. But it's called Shadows of the Sith, so they are a big plot point. They are a big mess, really. And Kaiser has this mask. It's on the cover, and it's the mask of Exim Panshard, who was an old Sith Lord, like viceroy of a planet. Like sounds like an absolute despot. Like and just ruling a lot of people with an iron fist. And this mask, like you mentioned, Darth Moomin's from the Lando comic. He's imbued his spirit into this mask. So people complaining about Palpatine returning and transferring his essence and stuff like that.
Yeah, there's a precedent for it.
There is a precedent set throughout, and it's been there since 91 with the Dark Empire comic as well, if you really wanted to go back.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it's a high level sort of Sith thing, like that not everyone's doing it. Not every Sith Lord is able to do it, but it's something that a few of them have achieved, and these ones have sort of imbued it into a relic, into an item.
It also echoes it strengthens the connection that maybe people do or don't get from the sequel trilogy, which is that this idea that relics can hold on to the past in some way and they can be influenced. Like, I think Rey touching that lightsaber and triggering all that stuff for a lot of people was sort of confusing. Like, I didn't know this was a force power that existed, But Palpatine is kind of doing the same thing with Vader's helmet. He's not possessing Kylo, but he's influencing Kylo through that helmet, because Kylo thinks he's talking to his father. You know, he's
Yeah.
hearing, or his grandfather. He thinks he's hearing Vader's voice from that helmet, but it's been Palpatine all along.
And that's the thing, is that it's that every voice you've ever heard, like, and it's always been him. Yeah, it is interesting, and Kaiser has not just this mask, but the lightsaber of another Sith Lord who had been passed down, and it's a cool sort of scythe lightsaber and everything. So visually, that would be amazing to see.
I'm wondering if we can get a glimpse of some of these artifacts in something like the Acolyte, where if we are going to take a step back to sort of the sort of High Republic era, maybe we can get a glimpse
end of, isn't it? I think that's what they're saying. Yeah, it's still 100 years or so, or at least a good chunk of time before the Phantom Menace.
Yeah,
and the fact that it's called the Acolyte, we're getting more and more mentions of the Acolytes of the Beyond.
Yeah,
maybe there's some connection. Maybe that group who aren't Sith, but they're also not the same as the Sith cultists on Exegol, but they definitely all operate in the same circles.
Yeah,
they're all Facebook friends.
Yeah, I mean, it could be the sort of the I don't know off the top of my head if it's mentioned in canon when the Acolytes were formed as a group, but that very well could be part of this story. So
yeah, I mean, the Aftermath trilogy was the first time they come up, which were the first books sort of coming out in the new canon.
And a lot of ties to the Aftermath series in this book, with like the mask coming from Yup Tashu, who was a character from those books and stuff.
I mean, and from Return of the Jedi, like one of the Emperor's sort of advisors and stuff. So he was sort of the leader of these Acolytes of the Beyond, and we know that they're the ones who got Vader's mask out. So somewhere down the line, Kylo Ren's had intersections with them. So it's all of that stuff, and it's in an interesting way. Like, it wouldn't surprise me if they're tied in with the Knights of Ren somewhere. So we're getting more of these characters, more of these Darksiders that aren't necessarily the Sith. They, back in the day, they would have been called Dark Jedi, like in the 90s stuff. That's what it would have been. But now it's just this looming threat, and that's what is haunting Luke. He's feeling this. Yeah. So he fights someone who's possessed by a Sith Lord, and by the end of the book is referring to themselves as that Sith Lord. But they get around having an actual
there isn't a new master apprentice like situation for him to decipher. And it also sort of ties in with the way we see Snoke presented, which is, even though we know now he was manipulated by Palpatine and all that stuff, he doesn't seem to be representing the Sith. Just the dark side of the Force, because he has been on this kick of,
I mean, it was one of the first things that we learned about Kylo Ren when we first sort of saw the image. It was like, he is not a Sith. He's Master of the Knights of Ren. We didn't know what that was at the time. We know more about them now, but they're not Sith. Like, there was one lightsaber amongst all of them, sort of thing. So it's really interesting stuff. We get some more of Ochi. Ochi's been developed quite a lot in the Darth Vader comics. We see him go to Exegol. We get that same scene from Dathan's perspective in this, so we don't get all the details from Ochi and Vader that we did there. But in the movie, when we see him briefly, like, he's got these eye goggles on, and in that comic, we see his eyes get burnt out on Exegol, and which is why he's got those implants. But
so crazy.
He's desperate to get back there because he knows the power that place has. He's seen there, he's been there, but he was taken there by Vader, and then he had his eyes burnt out so that he wouldn't be able to sort of see too much, basically. But he knows that there's so much power there, and so he's desperate. And this is a character now, because we know that he was a Jedi hunter during the Clone Wars. So he's been around for a long time, just lurking in the backgrounds. And at this point, it is a desperation mission. He's been tasked with finding this girl, and he sees finding the girl that we now know as Rey to be his key back, his way back in, sort of thing.
I loved not only getting more information about him, but also a glimpse at his personality.
He's a jerk. He's just an absolute dick. And like, you see him and you hear about this mythical like Jedi hunter, and you think he's going to be this stoic badass that we always think of as those. He's not. He's a cocky, arrogant son of a bitch. Like he's like a typical wrestling heel, like in a real sort of like MJF sort of way, more than your snarling bad guy.
Yeah, I kind of got like Skeletor vibes for him from him as well. Like he's always
Skeletor's
sort
a
of like
great
talking
analogy.
himself up as this big guy, you know, but he's also sort of Weasley and
he's Starscream if you want to go Transformers.
Absolutely,
sort of that way.
Starscream. Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. But yeah, he's desperate, so he's hunting down the family, and yeah, as we said, like Miramaya Ray's mother is very capable. They come up with some plans, and the way that they sort of end up intersecting with Ochi is in the fact that they like do outsmart him. They steal his ship, which we see them on, and it was always something that was confusing to me when watching Rise of Skywalker. It's like, okay, so they were on Ochi's ship, they were leaving Jakku,
right?
But then Ochi's back on his ship at the end, and it's like, what's the timeline?
Right.
And so Adam Christopher in this does a really good job of sort of breaking it down.
Fleshing it out, yeah.
They'd been living on Jakku, and they were friendly. They weren't friends because, as they go make a point of saying, like, Unkar Plutt can't have friends. He's too much of a grump. But I mean, this book was also kind of a redemption for Unkar Plutt because he was looking after Ray, and it's like your tab is running, and once you're paid up, she's gonna have to start earning her keep, and that's why she's now,
yeah, Unkar sort of exists somewhere between like Watto and Uncle Owen, where it's like looking after the kid. Like Watto does, like he doesn't like hate Anakin. He's sort of taking care of them. I mean, they are slaves.
As much as a slave owner can be like, kind to a 10-year-old boy, then yeah, Watto wasn't the worst.
Right. And while Owen is like gruff and like he's holding Luke back, he has Luke's best interests at heart. So it was interesting to slot Unkar between those sort of two viewpoints.
Yeah, I think if Ray died on a salvage dig, I don't think Unkar's gonna care too much.
Yeah,
but he's also, if she came up short, he was always going to give her just enough that she would survive food wise. I think.
Yeah.
Keep her hungry, keep her busy, keep her working. But yeah, like it wouldn't surprise me if he was like, that old AT-AT out there, you can go and live in that sort of thing when she got old enough. And yeah, we find out more about her and why she's left there and why they are leaving in Ochi of Bestoon's ship when they are leaving Ray or back on Jakku. And it is because they outsmart Ochi. They steal his ship right out from under him with the help of, from a distance, Lando and Comat.
Right.
Which is nice, sort of one of those, hey, there's that character down there. Like Lando sees Ray like poking out of a backpack.
Right.
But never has any idea who
has no idea who it is. Yeah.
No.
And likewise, Miramir and Dathan, they know that a Jedi is helping them, but they don't know it's Luke. And so
they know that Lando is helping them as well. Like Lando by name and a Jedi friend sort of thing.
Right. So and so you sort of
whole plan.
Ray knowing that this Jedi, this like unknown Jedi helped her, it like helps feed that idea of like the legend of the Jedi. And so when you get to Force Awakens and she's like Luke Skywalker, like that's clearly a name that means something to her. So yeah, I loved all of that.
And it's that it's Star Wars, so it gives them hope. Like the fact that these heroes are out there and they want to help them, it gives them the hope and the drive to sort of keep fighting. And like circumstances get in their way and block their path so that they can't just meet up with them. But that is always the intent. But they've got so many people right on their heels chasing them that they have to keep moving.
Yeah.
And I mean, at the end they're like, okay, cool. If we capture Ochi's ship, we might be able to we will lure him to us. We'll leave Ray so that she's safe, but we'll lure him to us, and then we can try and take him out. Things don't go well, and they meet a very tragic end. Like we see the scene that we get a very small snippet of in Rise of Skywalker, we get played out. And I mean, Ochi is also like Kaiser's possessed by the mask. Like he's that dagger, that Sith dagger, is very much like he's possessed by that. Like that has a power of its own.
And then if you extrapolate that out to like Ray is holding the dagger, and obviously the first thing, just like the lightsaber, she senses that like terrible things have happened using this blade. But then you sort of see it as when she takes that blade into the Death Star, it's like that's when she has the vision of being
her fall, like her slip up where she sort of dances with the dark side a little bit as well. Yeah, it's very much that dagger has power.
Yeah.
And Yeah, okay, sure. There's the convenience of the blade being cut to the right specifications and everything, but I always sort of see that as okay, maybe it wasn't always exactly that shape, but it was cut when you add in, and they've sort of reworked it to
Yeah,
sort
yeah,
of form that.
yeah, and again, like it's 17 years after Return of the Jedi, so that wreckage has been sitting there.
Yeah, yeah,
It could totally have been recut at some
yeah.
point.
And he's given that dagger by sort of the people who are sort of saying you need to bring us the girl, which
Right.
we know would have been the Palpatine original plan, like to feed off of her power.
Mm-hmm.
So it's interesting, but I mean, Dio's there on his ship, getting just absolutely abused and treated horribly. He's such a
Yeah,
good little droid who just wants to help out his master.
it was great seeing
He's
Dio again.
warning Ochi of like some of the dangers and stuff, but he's just kicked around and just left.
It was very much like the Grinch's relationship with the dog in the Grinch's.
Yeah, totally.
Like I just imagine like Ochi constantly kicking like Dio out of the way and stuff. But not only do we get to see Dio again, but I wasn't expecting to see Enric Pride come back into things.
Yeah, he sort of almost plays the Agent Callus sort of role of he's assigned to like the corporate sector, I think, in the book,
Mm-hmm.
but he's definitely still serving the Empire, the Emperor.
Yeah,
And he's an arrogant son of a bitch as he is in Rise of Skywalker, but
yeah,
he's got what I think 2 chapters where he interacts with Ochi.
yeah,
So and it's the clash of styles there where you've got this jerk Ochi who's cocky and everything, and then the very prideful general. And he's ranking himself up. He's giving himself his own ranks.
yeah. It was very like
Yeah,
Hux and Kylo
right.
again.
Definitely,
Yeah,
definitely. And yeah, he's sort of thinking about what sort of rank he should have had the Empire continued
right.
on at this point.
Yeah,
And so yeah, when he's what is it, Allegiant General Pride or something
yeah,
in the movie? So yeah, at that point it's like okay, you've just given yourself that title, haven't you?
right.
And then I mean, I think before we wrap up, like it's worth mentioning the end of this book where they're on Pasana. Ochi he's been fooled. Like the Dathan and Miramir, before he kills them, he does manage to fool them because they take some of the beads that we see Rey wearing at one point from the Forbidden Valley and Pasana. He finds those and he's like, right, that's where she's got to be. And he's so focused on finding the girl that he goes there, and it's his own hubris sort of leads him right into the sinking sands, and then he's
Yeah,
down there, and Lando and Luke track him there. Sometime later, it's a little bit of time later. I think a few weeks have passed, and they find his ship. They even see Dio like out of battery in the corner.
yeah,
And they stay, and that's when Lando says, like, I'm sticking around. I'm going to use this planet as my base of operations. He's not going to stay there permanently in his sort of rolling like caravan, but
yeah.
he's using that as his base of operations to continue his search for his daughter. Because he searched different sections of the galaxy, but he's never searched over there. So
Right.
it's an interesting thing. And he still feels like he needs to try and protect the girl. They find the bodies of Dathan and Miramir. They give them a nice burial.
Yeah.
But they know that the girl wasn't there. And they know that at this point, Ochi doesn't seem to be anywhere. So maybe he's out there hunting for the girl. So Lando wants to protect. Luke has to go back and get back to the academy and start training some more. But Luke has almost sort of completed his mission of ridding himself of these dreams, with more to come later on. But
and yeah, Lando's sliding into like the hermit role that's going to watch over. He's also watching over sort of Ochi's ship to see like if he ever comes back or something like that. So that was interesting. And yeah, the little insight that the armor he's wearing comes from Comat. I thought that was cool.
It's great. It's lovely. And Comat's still out there. So if they wanted to do more stories with her, like she's gonna definitely be an advisor to Luke. She's got a white lightsaber because her red one was like purified, much like Ahsoka's. So there are all these characters that have had redemption arcs, and Luke has helped many of them. So there are other Force users out there. Luke's not the only one. He's the only one who's sort of picking up the Jedi mantle. But they're out there, and these are people that he can go to for advice of different ways, different methods.
I left the book extremely curious about the formation of Luke's temple, because so far we've seen Grogu, like no students, like I'm just starting it, to okay, Ben's here and we have an idea that there are other students, but we don't know
at least a dozen or so. Yeah.
And then we have Kylo burning down the temple and theoretically killing everyone, though he mentions that he takes some with him, but we never see what happens to them.
Well, that's picked up in the Charles Soule's Rise of Kylo Ren comic book.
Yeah, okay.
So it's Luke. Luke thinks, I think, that he took a few of them with him, but he actually didn't. They were chasing him. Okay. He left, and the fire was a complete coincidence. Like, that was not a coincidence; it was a mistake. I don't think he was meaning to burn it down. He was leaving. They thought that he'd attacked and buried Luke. Luke's sort of out for the count at this point, and so they actually chase Kylo down. And it's in a scuffle that they have that the temple does get set ablaze.
And so, does Kylo kill them all?
Yeah. He does kill them. He doesn't. It takes a while. He doesn't want to, but they do. They chase him, but he does end up killing them. And that's part of his fall. That's when he's sort of meets back up with the Knights of Ren and kills old Ren, who was in charge of those. And sort of takes over that leadership. And it's again, it's Snoke manipulating and pushing him to do that through his ways. But
that's the comic where Snoke has a funny hat, right?
He's got a funny hat. He's on the station that's in one of the High Republic books. There's Charles Soule was definitely seeding in some things. One of the planets from the High Republic is in there. Lorna Sateka's in that book as well, with Luke and a young Ben at some point. There's definitely more with Lorna Sateka that we can get. He was very much an advisor to Luke. He wasn't like he's not force sensitive, but he's
an easy character to recast and introduce as a younger man. And I actually was sort of wondering if Jude Law in Skeleton Crew could be a young Lor San Tekka,
or other people from that sort of San Tekka clan, because they're mentioned quite a lot in this new canon.
And like, could these kids be potential students of Luke's that Lor San Tekka is like taking, from point A to point B? I mean, who knows? It's very interesting.
Field trip gone awry, or he's trying to get them to go to the temple and things go awry on the way there or something.
I mean, who knows? They could even be like kids that the Empire abducted and now they're trying to get back home or something. I mean, that show in relation to, I think, questions we have about Luke in this period of like putting the temple together and stuff. We could get some answers there. And also like Ahsoka, like she knows Luke obviously in Book of Boba Fett, but we haven't seen their first meeting and we don't really know where she goes in the sequel trilogy era.
We've learned about the San Tekka family in the High Republic. They were some of the people who were sort of navigating the hyperspace lanes.
Right.
So if they've any sort of some dealings with Purgil or anything, the last time we saw Ezra, he went out into hyperspace, but we don't know where. He didn't seem to know where he was going to be jumping to. So using some of that San Tekka knowledge to try and help and to try and find Ezra would be really interesting. So if Lore has been sort of a coming and going sort of visitor at the temple, and if Ahsoka is doing the same, it would make sense that they've crossed paths. And so there's some potential there. That'd be great. I'd be a big fan. And Jude Law as a young Max von Sydow would be interesting. I'd like to see it.
Yeah, I could see it.
It'd be good. I'm into it. Anything else about Shadows of the Sith before we wrap up?
I don't think so. Just that I'm excited to, Adam Christopher sort of hinted on Twitter, just like doing Q&As and stuff, that, there's perhaps more to come. So I'm just excited to see the further adventures of Lando and Luke and sort of get an idea of just filling in more of those gaps between 6 and 7. Because I think, between books, comics, television series and stuff, like there's 30 years to explore there, and we're really only starting to dip into it. So
and I think it's a good sort of way to do some of these stories that are so heavily reliant on the legacy cast, and it's fine having them come in for scenes and stuff, but I don't think you're putting a whole show around a younger Luke or Lando without recasting. And they've said now that they don't really want to do recasts. So to do it in books, it's all right there. It's all it's stories that are really fascinating. They add another depth, but they aren't essential. You don't need to read this if you don't want to, but if you want a deeper understanding of everything that's going on at this time, it's great.
And I think too, you know, the potential for an animated series, you know, this book picking up with Ben is like 13. You could totally do a series before this when he's a younger age and, you know, he's following Luke around, and we can get sort of the middle of the middle, you know, between Mandalorian and this book. There's still room for stories.
And he's a trusted student of Luke's. Luke is sort of putting him in charge of some of the younglings when him and Law have to go off to Tython or wherever. Like, so it's nice to see that. And I'd like to see that sort of, he's not a knight, but it's almost like it feels very much like he was close to being knighted on his own right. Like, so it's fascinating. It's a really good book. Lucasfilm Publishing seems to be good at keeping authors that they've done well with, that seem to enjoy it. And if they've got more story to tell, they'll bring them back. So hopefully we get some more of Adam Christopher doing Star Wars in the future.
Absolutely.
And we'll be here to talk about it when they do. Follow us on Live Action Star Wars on YouTube, on Twitter, Instagram, all of those places. You can find Adam at Adam Frazier on Twitter, and it's at Poppin' Pizza on Instagram, I think. Is that right?
Yeah.
Underscores between the N.
Yeah.
And then subscribe to your newsletter as well, which I should have put up a banner, but I didn't have time to get that.
Oh, that's fine. It's on Substack. It's Poppin' Pizza. You can find it fairly easily. So
there you go. You can find that through your Twitter anyway. So that's the best place people can find you, I think.
Yep.
And thanks for coming, Adam.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
We will be back next week. We're doing this Thursday, sorry. So if you're watching us now, this Thursday, Ralph and I will be back, and we're going to talk about the first episode of Light and Magic, the behind the scenes series. So tune in on Thursday at 3:30 UK time, but subscribe on YouTube and you'll get notified about that. But until then, may the force be with you. I'm not even going to do the regular outro.